Welcome to the Mid-Ohio Valley Public Forum video podcast. This podcast features issues of interest to the residents of the Mid-Ohio Valley area. Right now, with the coronavirus pandemic, civic life has changed greatly throughout our country. Because candidates can't campaign as usual, we are doing this video podcast series to help voters get better acquainted with candidates.
This week, we'll be interviewing candidates for the Wood County Board of Education. These interviews may be just a little bit longer than some of the other offices because there's a lot of ground to cover. And these candidates are only on your primary ballot. It's a nonpartisan race that'll be decided in the primary. So the primary election is your only chance to vote for your Board of Education choice.
Local school boards have nurtured and protected our democracy since the founding of free public education by helping see to the education of our future citizens. The local school board governance model is uniquely American. No other national educational system in the world has this form of local control.
Today, we'll be interviewing Stephen Thomas Smith. This Stephen Smith is a candidate for Wood County Board of Education. There's another Stephen Smith on the ballot. He's running for governor, not Board of Education. So welcome, Stephen. We're so glad you could make yourself available to do this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
A little bit about yourself and describe the district you'll be representing if elected.
Okay, I am a retired person at this point. I spent 30 years as a business person in various businesses in West Virginia and Ohio. In accounting and finance was my area. I spent the last 11 years of my professional life as a professor at WVU Parkersburg, teaching accounting and finance. I've been retired for just about 2 years now. I had a daughter who was graduating, getting ready to go to college, and a mother who was elderly and needed care. So a good thing and a bad thing, but they kept me busy for the last 2 years. I, if elected, would be representing District A. The Board of Education is 5 members, as we know. The county is divided into 3 geographic districts. There can be no more than 2 members from any district, and the 2 slots that are open in this election leave 3 people who were elected 2 years ago who will continue on the board. There's 1 from each district. So there can only be 1 person elected from any geographic district. One of the people running among the 6 who are running is Mr. Tice, who lives in District A, and I live in District A. So we both, even though there's 2 positions open, we both could not be elected. Only one of us could be elected. It's possible that neither one of us would be elected. There could be a person from District B and District C, and then there would just be the 1 person who's continuing from District A. There's always 1 district that just has 1 representative.
I've always been a bit confused by that system, so I'm glad you explained that. I think that's helpful.
Actually, 2 years ago, Judy Johnson, who is one of the candidates this time, ran, and she was one of the top 3 vote getters. So you would think when 3 to be elected, she was in the top 3, but because there were already 2 people who were ahead of her or continuing in her District B, she was not elected, and they jumped down to the 4th person in vote total who was seated.
I see. Well, you've kind of touched on this next question already, but what specific experience, skills, knowledge, education, perspectives do you have to offer that might be a tangible benefit to the Board of Education?
Okay. I'm sorry, I jumped on you a little bit there. I have degrees in business. I have a bachelor's degree from WVU Morgantown in business finance. I have a master's degree from Stetson University in Florida in accounting, and I have another master's degree from WVU Morgantown in general business management, an MBA. As I said, I had 30 years of experience in various kind of businesses. I was a banker, I was in manufacturing, I worked for the newspaper for 10 years, running their financial management. So I've seen a lot of ground over the years. I've actually murdered myself out of jobs several times by helping the owners sell their business. Um, I was fortunate that I married well. And my wife is younger than me. She is a healthcare administrator. She's one of the executives now at the Memorial Health System in Washington County. And she has a good career, and I was able to retire. And as I mentioned, I had a couple of reasons for that I wanted to take care of. My daughter is now in college. My mother passed away, and matter of fact, just in the last few weeks here. So now I have some free time to do other things. Now, the Board of Education, we have a question, I think, later on to talk about why I'm running, so I'll hold off on that. But I have some skills that I think I can apply: management, financial and accounting type management. Now, the Board of Education, an educational system, is not like a business. There's a different motivation. We're not trying to make a profit. We're not trying to satisfy owners, particularly in terms of making them money, but we are trying to satisfy owners, being the citizens who pay the taxes, and providing a quality education system for either their children or grandchildren, or if they have no one in the school system, at least something that makes the area attractive to businesses to locate. I believe that I also have a unique perspective, and then I spent the last 11 years of my working life teaching. Now, not in a public school classroom of K through 12, but in college at WVUP. I was always a good accountant and finance person. I did that for 30 years, but I had to learn to be a teacher. And it taught me that it's hard to be a teacher, even at college, where by and large, the people who are there want to be there. They've paid to be there, or somebody has paid for them. There are a few, of course, where the parents said, you have to go, I'll pay for it. And they're just trying to keep from getting thrown out of the house. But most are motivated. And so that's good. Now in public schools, of course, we have sometimes not so much motivation, which makes it even harder. WVU has a primary education program, and I interacted with the faculty there quite a bit and learned from them, and then did a lot of work on my own to become a better teacher. I had to learn how to do that and work at it. And it gave me an appreciation of what teachers have to do. So I'm not just a business person. I have that background to put together, and I think that will be helpful.
Well, you touched on this. It's time to tell us what's motivating you to run for office. What's the main thing that made you decide that serving on the Board of Education was something you really wanted to do?
Well, I've been following things as the Board of Education for years. I actually ran for the Board of Education in 1992. And my slogan at that time was, it's time for a change. And at that time, there was issues with how funds were being spent. They were being spent in areas that I thought were inappropriate, where more money should go into the classroom. We're always looking for dollars to help the education system and put into the classroom so we get that quality that we want so badly. And I followed it ever since. I did not win that election. There were 11 people running for 2 slots in those days, and I got beat out by another district person, District A. A young fellow who named David Kurtz, who did a good job, served on the board, and then went out in the world. And last I heard, he was in Haiti trying to help disadvantaged people there. He's the kind of person that liked to help people, and he did that on the board, and I was proud of him. And if I had to lose to somebody, I was proud I lost to him. But I followed it ever since. I come from an educational family. My great-grandfather was a school principal and a teacher. Matter of fact, he was in Wood County part of his career. My grandmother and her sister were both trained as teachers and taught early in their life. And now I married into a teaching family. My mother-in-law is a retired school principal, and she has 2 sisters who were who were teachers and then school administrators, and they're all retired down in Arkansas. That's where my wife is from. So I hear a lot about education just by being part of my family, and it's something I've always followed. I feel like we're going in the wrong direction in some ways, and I would like to rectify that.
Well, so what are your thoughts on the current state of public education in general and Wood County in particular?
Well, as I said, I believe that in a time of decline in terms of student population, which means a decline in terms of resources, we're spending our dollars in not the best way. I'd like to see that changed. At the same time, I think we're getting a lot from what we spend. We have many good teachers and administrators and support personnel who provide a pretty good educational system. But our student population is likely to continue to decline. There are fewer children per family. There are fewer families in our area. It's just the nature of the way our economics are right now. So we have to continue to work all the time to get the most we can out of every dollar. And by that, I mean in the classroom, the quality. I got a wonderful education here. My daughter graduated a year ago in May. She got a wonderful education here. So much so that she did early college, and she's now a junior, even though she graduated from high school a year ago. So very pleased with that. But there can always be improvements. There could be improvements in 1992. There can be improvements today. The board doesn't have total control over things. The professional educators have a lot of that. The board has other responsibilities. I think we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I felt like I could bring something to the table that would help. And that's what I hope to do.
If you're elected to the board, what's one thing you really want to accomplish during your term?
Well, I would like to see a streamlining of administration. Just this past Saturday, today being Monday the 11th, this past Saturday, the board held a lengthy session about their upcoming year budget, which will start July the 1st. In that budget, there are cuts in personnel and other areas, which, you know, their resources are going down, so they have to make cuts. There's cuts in personnel. 3 schools were closed are going to close at the end of this year and for the beginning of next year. And so personnel is reduced. But if we look at the administration level, it's actually increasing. School administration is increasing in the budget over $400,000. Now they're going to reduce central office administration, and that's going to help, but the net administration cost is going to go up by more than $100,000 in a time when we've closed 3 schools, and that just doesn't make sense to me. Certainly that's my main emphasis at the beginning. I hope that's rectified fairly quickly. The other area I just talk about real quickly is delivery platforms for classes. You know, the traditional classroom is certainly great, but in my 11 years of teaching in college, I worked extensively with online, which is a big deal for colleges. Delivery systems, which are somewhat similar to what we're using today to record this. Now, they can be a little bit more robust, a little bit more interactive than the Zoom system, but being able to deal with students who aren't physically in the room with you. I mentioned I have a master's from Stetson University in Florida. It's located in DeLand, which is halfway between Daytona Beach and Orlando on the old road. I'm one of the few people in my master's class who was ever there. We had students from all over the world, but we had a system, a room that we met in twice a week, live, with headsets, with microphones, and this was 10 years ago, and interacted live. The session was recorded. If you couldn't come to class, you could review it. And so that kind of facilitation, wouldn't it be nice if we had that now in the COVID crisis? The teachers are doing their best. They're sending out packets of papers for students to work with. And I think they're probably doing some Zoom and some other things to try to keep up with their students. But if we had facilities in place, and they're not hugely expensive, by the way, we could be delivering things to students, and maybe, hopefully in our lifetime, we're not going to have this kind of pandemic again. But what if we did? What if we had some kind of disaster that we couldn't meet in the schools? Having this kind of facility would be wonderful, but we can also use it for things like elective classes. Maybe you only have 3 or 4 students in each of the 3 high schools that want to do a particular elective. We could do 1 teacher, facilitate online, and provide those electives. So I think it's worthwhile. I've used it extensively in my college teaching, and I'd like to see us take a serious look at it in K-12 education as well.
So what is your understanding of the responsibilities of the Board of Education, and what do you see as the primary role of a board member?
Well, it's interesting that one of the first things they do once you're elected is send you off to training to tell you what you can't do. Um, yes, we have some level of local control, but there are restrictions. The state actually runs education. In our state constitution in 1863, it was very unusual to say this, but they put in the constitution that we're going to have an efficient and free public schools. A lot of places didn't have that in 1863. So that was a wonderful thing to do. But the state has always, through both finances, the majority of the money that comes into the school system comes from the state. Yes, there are local property taxes, and that's a big chunk, but it's still not the majority. And then by law, there's a whole chapter of the state code that deals with education and specifically what you can and can't do. Boards can set policies. They can do a budget. And they also have other functionality. They serve as a kind of in the grievance process, a step, which I always thought was a little silly. If you're overseeing a system, you're kind of the employer. You're the representatives of the owners, the citizens. So if you're in a grievance, why would you be one of the steps in passing whether the grievance should happen or not? In fact, I think it passes through that process quite a bit to go to a arbiter, but there are some things that I think are a little silly in the way our relationship with the state runs. I would like to see more local control. Now, we can't do that as a board. We can advocate for it. I think that's an important role of members of the Board of Education, is to advocate with our legislatures, maybe to go to Charleston at appropriate times and lobby for changes so that local control. You and I have trouble taking away time from our life to go down to Charleston or to Washington and lobby our people who are making the decisions. But we can go to the Board of Education, we can go to the county commission, we can go to the city government, and we can make ourselves heard. And so the closer we get to the people with what we're doing for the people, the better off we are.
What's your understanding of the relationship of the Board of Education to the Wood County Superintendent of Schools? And, what do you see as the differences in their roles?
Well, just to aggravate the poor person as most as we possibly can, I'm sure. No, that's a little facetious. Obviously, the board hires the superintendent. They choose whether or not to renew a contract with that person. So they have some level of control over what that person does in terms of philosophy. Now, the superintendent has broad authority. The board can set policies. The superintendent makes recommendations on almost everything that the board votes on. In some cases, the board can't make changes to something that the superintendent puts forth. They can only say yes or no. And, having been a member of businesses leadership, that's a little frustrating for me. I think you should be able to come up with ideas and inject them. Now, at the same time, I'm not a professional educator, even though I have that college education background. I realize some of the board members are trained professional educators, and that's great. So as a group, could we come up with something, again, with public input? You always want to listen to the public. There'll be some wild things that'll come up from folks, but sometimes there's really good ideas that come from individuals who aren't trained as a teacher. Maybe just, using their sense to give us an idea. But the superintendent really has the vast control. Whoever he or she might be, once they're hired, they set the tone. So it's important as to who is brought in and for how long they're employed. Because anytime you're going to talk about renewing a contract, okay, now you have a chance to do something about it if you're not happy with the results.
So the Wood County School Board, by my reckoning, will have met 31 times by the end of the school year. How often have you been able to attend Wood County Board of Education meetings?
Well, in the most recent time period, I started attending after I decided to run. I attended the meetings from late January up until the COVID situation started. As it happens, I was in Arkansas. At that time, my father-in-law passed away last fall, and I had gone to help my mother-in-law settle the estate. We were going to have a family gathering. My wife's birthday was coming up. And unfortunately, as being a healthcare administrator, she couldn't join us. So the last meeting I attended was early March. And then since then, because of various things, as I said, my mother passed away. She was in decline. I haven't done the Zoom meetings until this past Saturday. I was able to join them for the budget session. Now, previous to that, I followed it. I mentioned that I worked for the newspaper for 10 years, so I'm a bit of a newspaper reader. I read the local paper every day. I also read other out-of-town papers every day, and actually read the physical printed page rather than online. I still like getting ink on my fingers, but I followed that for quite some time. The reporting there. Back in my younger days when I worked at the newspaper, I roomed with a reporter. And I know reporters and teachers are a lot alike. They're not well paid in either profession. They have to have a lot of education and knowledge to do their job, and they have standards. And reporters have standards, and I've always been impressed with that. And so I got to know a lot of them back in the day, and so I respect their work and I trust what they're telling me. Now, they're not perfect. I don't get everything that's in a meeting, but you can't always physically be there. Now with the Zoom, of course, it's probably a little bit easier if we can, I could not be wearing pants right now and you wouldn't know the difference. So, you could be a little bit more comfortable than going to the actual meeting. But I think going and learning what's going on, however you do it, is important. I feel like I have a good handle on, in general, what's been happening. I don't have all the details. No member of the public outside of the 5 board members really has everything, and the superintendent. Even other administrators may not know every detail. So that I've done the best I can to learn what I'm asking people to let me do. And I think I've done a fairly good job at that. Of course, the people are going to tell me on election day.
Wood County schools have been facing a severe budgetary crisis. What is your understanding of the problem, and how do you feel like you would address it?
Well, of course, the 2 big sources of revenue for the school system are the state allocation, the state taxes state tax dollars that are funneled for education to the school systems, and that's based on student count. And we've been declining in that for several years, and probably will continue to decline. So those dollars will continue to ratchet down. The state controls a lot about how teachers are paid. So when you hear about the governor talking about a raise for teachers, they're going to provide that in the school formula. Now, then the other big source is local property tax. The board sets a levy rate on all the various kinds of property, homes, businesses, land, equipment. Our cars are taxed with property tax, but that's limited by state law. And they can only go up to a maximum amount, and pretty much have been at that. And then we have a third thing that various counties can do, which Wood County has done for quite some time, is vote additional taxes on ourselves. We have an excess levy, and we can also vote to be taxed even beyond that to build things like schools, like additional buildings, or to repair roofs. We have what's called a bond call. And so funds were raised from that because the voters said, we're willing to pay additional. So we really have 3 things locally that we're paying for into the schools: the basic property tax, excess levy that we vote on periodically, and then the school bond call, which goes until it's paid off. The majority of those funds were used to build the new elementary school in Williamstown, which is going to consolidate Waverly and Williamstown. The budget crisis comes from the fact that student population continues to decline, and that big chunk from the state is going to go down. How do we do that? Well, we have to be frugal. We have to get the most out of our dollars. They made the choice to close 3 schools. It's tough to close a school. School can be a community for people, brings them together in neighborhoods. I grew up and went to school from 1st through 9th grade. We didn't have kindergarten in my day, but literally right around the corner from me So, I know what a community school can be and how important that can be for students. I never saw a bus come to my school until I was in the 7th grade. All of our elementary kids walked to school or were driven by their parents in a car. Um, and then the outlying schools came into the junior high, which happened to be physically on the same piece of property as my elementary. It's a crisis in that something wasn't done about it year by year by year. You have to make choices all the time. And regardless of what anybody tells you about this job, it is a political job, and everybody that signed up to run is a politician. Now, hopefully we can not be a stereotypical politician, but we are politicians from the moment we signed our name and paid the $25, because politics is how we interact and govern ourselves. And we have to do the best we can with those resources, understanding that we can't just snap our fingers and get more money. We can go out and ask the voters with the excess levy. We can ask for bond money to do things, but they don't always come through. For years over in Ohio, they've had trouble with that, passing levies and passing bonds to build new facilities. Lots of times they're voted down. Wood County's always been good about providing money for schools. And I think a lot of folks here are proud of that. I've always been proud of that.
Wood County schools have lost critical funding that has perhaps put into question whether we can continue to have local control over our schools and avoid being taken over by the state. What is your thought about that?
Well, the state has, as I said, is the ultimate control of education. There is a state board of education, a state superintendent of schools. It actually used to be an elected position, if you can imagine, many, many years ago. It's been an appointed position for some time, and the state board is appointed rather than elected. They make choices. For instance, when schools were closed here in Wood County, they had to agree to that. The school board voted to close those 3 schools and consolidate them, but it had to go to the state, and they had to review it and pass on it before it could actually happen. As far as taking over, I don't think Wood County is in real imminent danger of that. Some schools have been very poorly mismanaged in this state. One of the things that we need to look at in this state is we have 55 counties, and we have a county unit school system. It doesn't make a lot of sense economically to do that. Over in Washington County, they have several school districts within just the county of Washington County. Now, how do they do that? Well, they have far less administration. Their administrative cost per student is lower than Wood County and a lot of counties in West Virginia, because we stick with that county system. If we did smaller systems, for instance, that covered geographic areas, maybe brought in some of the rural counties, maybe the southern part of Wood County goes in with Wirt County, for example. Maybe that would be a model that might work better for us. But that administrative cost per student needs to come down. And I think it's something we need to continue to work towards. As far as the systems that I've seen over the years that have been taken over have been just gross mismanagement. If we hadn't have done something, if they had continued to operate all the schools that we had and continued to spend the money, for political reasons, that would be great. Everybody says, oh, great, you're keeping our schools open. So a hard decision had to be made. Was it the right decision? Well, I don't know all the facts and figures. I know that one of the schools closed was the oldest building we have, but it's in a poor area, where that school is central to that neighborhood. It's not very far from me, but it's a poor area where their students draw in. And now they have to go to a bigger school. I went to a bigger school just because of the nature of being in the baby boom. We were building on to schools when I was going through schools, not consolidating them and closing them down. In fact, I had a friend who I went to junior high school with here in Wood County who moved to Missouri. His high school had less students in it than our junior high had. And so it's a difference that it's a philosophy difference that maybe we need to take a look at. As far as the takeover, though, I don't think it's imminent, but we always have to be watchful of how we administer the resources that we have.
So you've touched on this a little bit. Education will be changing in the post-COVID-19 world. How do you see those changes coming about?
Well, we have to look at what's happening in the world and how we can use the resources that we have to get the most from our dollars in terms of our education. I want to be able to offer a broad spectrum to our students. You know, the reading, writing, and arithmetic is great, but we need a broader education because a lot of our students are going to end up going out into the larger world. I wish that everyone that I graduated high school with at Parkersburg High School many years ago, there were 725 of us. If there's 50 of us that live in this area now, I'd be really surprised. You know, most of them through Facebook are all over the world. And that's because of economic opportunity. We just don't have as much. Of course, we're all getting to the age from my group now that everybody moves back here for retirement. So I'll be glad to have a lot of my old friends nearby. But we need to look at what's possible, what's out there, how can we do better? And the board should have an impetus there. I think educators try to do that for the most part. I am amazed at the creativity of teachers that I've seen locally, and then you hear stories on the news about what they're doing all over the world. And you know, particularly in our country now with what's happening. As I said before, I hope I never have to live through another pandemic, but I'm not done living through this one yet. I lost a great aunt and uncle in the Spanish flu pandemic 100 years ago. My grandfather's older brother and sister died within 2 weeks of each other at age 21 and 19. Young, healthy people who caught the flu and were gone very, very quickly. I hope that doesn't become the case where we start losing more and more of the young folks. It's tough enough to lose the older ones. I've just lost my mother. She was in her mid-80s. She had respiratory problems. Thankfully, COVID was not part of the mix. It was just her life that finally caught up with her and was relatively quick. But some of these things are horrific. And so I hope we don't see that. But as far as education, continue to work to use the tools to be efficient. Our state constitution says we're supposed to have an efficient school system. So let's be efficient. Let's provide the best quality education we can and save the dollars. I would like to see, you know, as a board member, I don't have a lot to say about what teachers make. The state makes a big part of that decision. But you know, I think teachers should be paid more. It should be one of the premier professions as far as pay. I can tell you that college teachers don't get paid much better. I took a big pay cut from private industry to go into teaching, but it was 11 years that I loved. And so I know that, and from teachers that I've known, I know that there's a lot of rewards to it outside of the dollars, but you also have to live. We lose a lot of our great teaching talent to other states just because for the same job, they pay more. So we have to continue to do the best we can to keep those folks and provide them an adequate living.
Children must be educated and protected at the same time. So if you could tell us briefly, how do you feel about the following things? Implementing professional education on remote learning platform and other tools for teachers.
Well, I'm a big advocate of that because I found it, as a student in my master's degree program, how efficient it was. I was in a classroom, and like I say, the technology that was being used, I came to find out was relatively inexpensive. I wanted to try it after I got my master's degree in my college teaching, and I found out what the price was, and I wanted to implement it. And as it happened, I'm a bit of a gambler. I enjoy horse racing, for example. I won a trifecta. For horse racing people don't know what that is. And I picked the 3 horses. One of the horses had a name that was like my college roommate's widow. My college roommate unfortunately passed away many years ago. His widow's name was, this horse had the same name. And I picked that horse. So I got a bet on that horse, and I picked a 3, and I won enough on that horse race for a $2 bet to be able to buy this thing for a year. And then I showed the results to my administration, my college president and my dean, and they eventually bought it and have continued to use it even after I retired, because it was really a terrific tool. There are tools like that. Zoom is an example that a lot of people are using now. There's a lot of different ones out there. They can be used in a lot of different ways to enhance education. We need to continue to do that kind of thinking. You know, educators are a big resource, but also other folks can bring ideas to the table. Now, the educators always have to vet us because they're the professionals. I want to hear what they say, what they think, and how we can do it the best. But we need to come together to do that, work as a team.
So what about class sizes in regard to social distancing efforts?
Well, let's say that you need social distancing for a class, and you have 2 physical classrooms. You could use a technology like this for the teacher to deal with those 2 classrooms, for example. We could spread the students out, and they could be live. You know, they could talk back and forth to the teacher. You can use little small mics, like they use, for instance, in my church, to record the choir or to project that beautiful music. A lot of different things that are very, very relatively inexpensive to do things like this. So we could get that physical back together, but still spread out, and use technology to use our teaching resources. So will it work? Well, we need to talk about it, if nothing else, because we're going to have to do something. Hopefully we get through the pandemic, and then we learn about how we can use those resources in other ways to enhance education.
Now, what about protecting elementary students when it comes to hand hygiene? We all know the little kids are not real good about
Well,
that.
having, as before we got started, I think I mentioned about taking care of my great niece. Now she's still just 1, so she required me to clean her up. But I also have a great nephew who has just started in school, and I know it would be hard to herd him to stay clean. So that's one of the tough things about teaching in the K-12 system. You know, you have to kind of bring those folks in. Do we need an aide, you know, to work with the teacher? Can we put together a system to save enough resources in other ways to have somebody there to make sure that those kind of things are happening? You know, rather than one person for 20 students, making sure that everybody gets their hands washed, maybe there's another person to help them out with that. Not at a teacher's pay level, but somebody who, you know, can make a living at an aide's pay, and also feels like they're doing something positive for kids. You know, that's a big thing for folks in education. I know it was for me and a lot of the people I know, that you feel like you got something accomplished. Some days you don't. Some days you beat your head against the wall and, well, I didn't get too far today. But most days it's, I really did something positive. I know that some of the teachers that my daughter interacted with are just proud of seeing her, and, you know, a lot of the kids that are out there. I'm so proud of some of my students that I had in college. There's one young lady who, she is in the insurance business now. And so I see this giant picture of her on a billboard all the time. And I just love that. You know, I take great pride in that. I had a little bit to do with her education. I hope I helped her, but it just makes me feel good. I know a lot of teachers feel that way when the students are successful, and they mourn when something bad happens too. So we have to keep working, I think, is the important thing.
So Wood County has a number of teacher vacancies and a lack of substitutes. What do you think the BOE should do to retain and recruit teachers?
Well, of course, pay is an important thing. We're educating in our colleges here in West Virginia some fine students to come out into the education world. The vast majority of them don't stay in West Virginia. WVUP, WVU, Marshall, it's the same thing in their education programs across the board. There's more opportunity for folks. Now, and if we had other opportunities, in my time, we had the big plants here, and most of the teachers were ladies. The ladies were married to somebody who had a good job at one of the plants, either a worker or one of the engineers or so forth. So we had these teachers who didn't need to have, a really top-notch salary, even though it was low for their educational level, because they had this other resource. It's a little bit like my situation. I can retire a little bit early in life because my wife has a good career. And so we don't have that as much anymore. We've downsized in a lot of things. A lot of companies are gone. So now we need to find the resources to pay our teachers competitively with other states so we can keep them and keep our classrooms stocked. There's the aging out of teachers. Could you take somebody, for instance, with my background and teach me how to teach? There are programs like that. I actually looked at one many years ago to take someone with my accounting and finance background and teach me how to teach and come in as a teacher or perhaps as a substitute in business type classes in the public schools. There are folks who have a background in English or in chemistry, or engineers who are retired. That's a potential resource as well. Now, one, they got to want to do it. And two, they got to get that education on how to be a teacher, as I mentioned before. It's not just you pop in. Colleges do have a bit of a fallacy that if you have the academics in a particular area, you can just pop right into the classroom and teach. Well, it's hard. It takes some understanding of what teaching is and what learning is. But that's something we should encourage. I don't know that the board has the resources to really do a program, but we need to think outside of that box that everybody talks about. I've never been in the box. I'm hopeful I've never are in one, but thinking outside of the restraints around us is important. Use the creativity, and I don't know that I have all the answers. I don't know that anybody has all the answers, but we have to work together for them. And sometimes we're going to argue about it, and that's okay. Sometimes we'll stomp and, get upset, and then we'll get over it because that's just the way humans need to do to make progress.
Schools across our nation have had to deal with threats, and Wood County's been lucky so far, but we're not any exception to the rules. So here we have the schools doing active shooter drills, and then in addition to those, you have cyber threats. So what do you think the board can or should do to help make schools safe?
Well, of course, physical safety is important. I know during the time my daughter was in school, I would maybe have to pick her up for an appointment or something, and I would come to the school door, and they had a buzzer. I buzzed. Someone in the office spoke to me and said, "Come on in." Great, except that once I was inside of that locked door, I could go anywhere I want. The office, in many cases, wasn't right across from the door. I could have had a handgun or, for that matter, a rifle stuck under my arm and started shooting. We need to look at physical barrier security, cyber security, cyber threats. We need to get a better system on that, but of course that's a universal for all humankind to address those kind of things. But the board should continue to look at those things. Physical safety is important. I take school safety in my family is very important because my wife was a nurse in the emergency department in a hospital in Jonesboro, Arkansas, which is one of the school shootings that a lot of people don't think about. It was one of the first school shootings. It was eclipsed by what happened in Columbine, Colorado, because that was so much more horrific. But some middle school kids brought their guns and laid them outside, pulled the fire alarm, ran out and picked up their guns and started shooting anybody that came out the door. My wife was in the emergency department that day and saw the results of that. So we take it, very seriously. And of course, when our daughter went to school, we were concerned about her. And so there can be improvements, and they're working on that. They're trying to do some things with security to maybe let the person into the building a little bit, and then somebody see them within. You got to put the resources into that to do it. A human has to interact. It can't all be, like some things that technology can do for us, humans have to interact here. Right now, at the hospital that my wife administers, there's somebody sitting at the door to question you and take your temperature before they let you in to make sure you don't have COVID. Well, we may need somebody at the door of a school to make sure that you're legit and that you're not carrying a weapon before you get past where, you could start doing some harm. It's going to cost some resources. We may have to put those resources in. That's just the nature of our world. I don't know, again, what the best answer is, but I'm willing to work on it. I'm willing to talk with people. And I think if we put our heads together, we can do it.
What are your thoughts on special education, either for advanced students or for the students who need more help in our county?
Well, I've kind of experienced both ends of the spectrum. My daughter, as I mentioned, is pretty advanced. She did early college. And after 1 year after high school graduation, she's a college junior because of that. I was grateful for that. She was in the advanced programs from elementary through middle school. I keep wanting to call it junior high because that's what it was called in my day. And that was great because that gave her incentive. And I saw other kids in programs, like we worked with the program at the Actors Guild. So I met with a lot of other kids of her age group, and they were in those kind of programs, those advanced programs. Going back a little farther on the other side, back in my single days, I dated a woman who had 3 children, one of whom had a disability. She had a brain damage. And was in a wheelchair and had to have the really intense special education. So, I've seen kind of that whole spectrum, and we have to give every kid the possibility to grow as much as they can. Let's give those advanced kids something to keep them challenged so they don't get bored. At the same time, we don't want to leave behind the kids who are struggling a little bit to learn. I back in my day, I know a young man who came into first grade, same time as me, same age. He didn't have kindergarten because we didn't have public kindergartens in those days. I'd gone to a private kindergarten. My family could afford that. He didn't have that possibility because his family couldn't afford it. I'm glad that we have public kindergarten. We have some preschool things going on. Hopefully we can enhance that because there's a whole lot of learning. I can tell you with that 1-year-old I've been taking care of in the last few weeks, there's a whole lot of learning going on right there even. So those kind of things. No, I hate to use this phrase, but it actually makes sense in this case. No child left behind. Now, that didn't work out as a program so much, but I don't want to leave any child behind. I want to give everybody as much opportunity as we can to enhance their learning, to give them a set of skills for life once they go across that high school stage. They may not, go on to college. That may not be the path that makes sense for them. There may be other skills that they need training and enhancement on. I know that my fellow's been doing my plumbing for years, didn't go to college. He has a pretty good career, makes a good living, and he's happy because he's doing something he loves doing. And there are a lot of people like that. The idea that every student needs to go to college, as a college teacher, I can tell you that's not the case. Certainly, I liked having students, but I felt bad about taking money from somebody that really didn't need a college education to do what they wanted to do. Now, you do need skills, and maybe we need to find a way post-secondary, but the board doesn't have a lot on that. Although we do have the part of the Caperton Center out at WVUP is administered by the Wood County Board. So maybe there's some enhancements there. But again, give every kid as much as we can to get them ready for life.
This is a two-part question. What do you think you will enjoy the least about serving on the Board of Education if you're elected?
Uh, I've been involved in the political world for some time. In addition to running for the Board of Education in 1992, I kind of got involved in other politics. I'm a member of a particular political party. It's not the D or the R party. I'm a libertarian, and so that's a small party. And so I know what those struggles can be like. I've run for office under that banner. Other offices beside the Board of Education. And Board of Education is nonpartisan. I particularly think city council should probably be nonpartisan too. But anyway, politics, once you're in politics, you got to be willing to accept criticism. You know, whatever I do on the Board of Education, somebody's not going to like. And somebody's, you know, in this day and age, somebody's going to post something on Facebook or Twitter and say, you know, I'm the lowest form of life and so forth. It's not going to be fun, but I signed up for that. So I got to be willing to accept it. So I think that's probably the thing I least look forward to. But at the same time, I understand it. And it's not going to break my heart that somebody doesn't like me.
So what excites you the most about serving on the board if you're elected?
Well, seeing things improve, the possibility that I can have a hand in making things better. That's what I will strive for. That's what I hope for. You know, I'm not doing this because I need something to do. As a retiree who did that for two things that are now ending, I'm also becoming a court-appointed special advocate for child abuse and neglect cases, because that's something else I think I can do. You know, I've looked at other volunteer opportunities. I don't like just sitting around, but if I can do something that has a positive effect on the future, then it's going to be like the lady on that billboard that I talked about. When I see those kids out there being a success, being civic leaders, that's going to be important.
With that, we'll move to the hot seat.
Okay.
There are issues in education today that are, or could be, considered hot button issues. These tend to get a lot of interest from the public and have been known to divide school boards and communities. Some of the issues are especially controversial, and a few have come up in Wood County.
So we'd like to get your brief take on these issues. For this purpose, we'll use a format of support, not support, or support with qualifications. We're looking for one word or one sentence answers on these. It's a rapid fire format.
Okay.
Here we go. Random drug testing of students.
Don't support. Not ineffective, according to my daughter. Too many kids she's seen beat it.
Random drug testing of teachers and school personnel.
As someone that administered employees for 30 years, I can tell you that I'm concerned about impairment. Random testing, it doesn't do that. I don't care what you do at home. You come clean to work. And so you can do your job and you're not a danger to yourself or others. So no, I don't support random testing.
School consolidation.
I hate to see it, but it may be necessary. You know, if we continue to lose students, we're going to have to do it. We also got aging buildings we're going to have to do something about. So maybe it's making bigger schools. Maybe it's making more smaller school units. I'm not sure what the best choice is. We have to work on it. So that's a kind of qualified thing, I guess.
Expending money to make schools more green and energy efficient.
Well, of course, energy efficient saves us money. There's a big initiative right now in the Wood County schools to do that. You got to be careful. Are you really going to get savings out of it? WVEP did something similar. So I support those things, not just because of the environmental impact. I'm glad of that, but from the simple fact that it can save us money that we can use somewhere else.
Providing vouchers for school choice.
Well, of course, at the board level, that's not something that I get to vote on. So you might want to ask the folks in the House of Delegates and the State Senate on that, or the Congress. Free and efficient public schools. That was the mandate from our Constitution during the Civil War, if you can imagine. So let's work towards that. Let's make a system of schools that people want to come to, that people want to live here and be in those schools. So I'm not so much about using tax dollars to support private schools. As I said, I went to a private kindergarten. My family could afford it. I'm glad that we now have public kindergarten so that everybody can benefit from that.
Establishment of charter schools.
You know, I'm going to need to learn more about what a charter school is supposed to be. I hear that and it's talked about. It's like, okay, now we're going to set up a competing system with the public schools. Okay, well, so are we going to tell every person that has a kid that you got, that's kind of like the vouchers. Now you got X amount of money and you can do that. But that's not how the tax system works. We all pay in, including people that don't have children. I didn't have a daughter till I was 42. I paid a lot of taxes before I ever had a kid that was in school. So I'm not sure that's the best way to improve education.
Cutting arts and elective subjects to concentrate on basic subject education.
Absolutely don't support that. We've got to find the money. We can find money to play football. We can find, and sports are great. I'm not an athlete. I'm an athletic supporter, but you know, I loved baseball. I wasn't that good at it. But there were other things. My daughter benefited from speech and debate and drama and all these things. I knew kids who did quiz bowl and these different things that they did. I was a vocal student in junior high, and I loved it. Didn't continue it in high school because if I wanted to go to college, even though I had a family that was doing pretty well, I still needed money. And so I started working when I was 15. But I'm glad that I had those opportunities, and I think we need to keep them for our students. It makes you a better person, and it makes for a better education.
Increasing instructional staff, decreasing administrative staff.
Yes. We can be efficient. You know, we just hired or just appointed a second principal for Jefferson Elementary. Jefferson Elementary is going to have 600 plus students. They already had one principal and 2 assistant principals. And we've added somebody at the principal's level, the highest pay that we have outside of the central office in our system. So 2 principals, 2 assistant principals for 600 plus students. That junior high that I talked about throughout this had 600 plus students back in the 1970s. We had 1 principal and 1 assistant. Things have changed, but they haven't changed that much. Did our administrators get weaker? I don't think so. If they did, we need to get some new ones because there's people out there that can do the job. So more dollars in the classroom. Now that includes the support people, the aides, the cooks. You know, we have to take care of those folks too. We got to feed them. We got to get them there on the bus. We got to, you know, do all those things. So the administrators, hey, in private business, what was the first thing that got cut? I've been told so many times that I was a bean counter and overhead as an accounting person because I wasn't in sales, I wasn't in production, but you know, I had a function. I had to make it as efficient as possible to make myself viable. Administrators have to do the same thing. Don't tell me you need 3 to do a job that 1 can do.
Increasing the cost of dental insurance, which was secured in lieu of a pay raise.
You know, we've done that in the public sphere, not just in education, but I worked for the state of West Virginia for 11 years. And I can tell you the state and state entities like boards of education should be careful about that. Now, at the same time, because we don't offer great salaries, traditionally we've offered, you know, a good benefit package, but you got to know that you have the resources to pay for it. The Board of Education has just been struggling through some kind of local retirement program that was started years ago, and they weren't taking in enough money to pay out the benefits that they agreed to. Did they not have somebody look at this before they, you know, look, hey, it sounds great. You know, you pay in $20 a week and we'll give you dental benefits. Well, Yeah, that sounds wonderful, but that's not how the world works. Maybe somebody, with an accounting and finance degree might be able to help them.
Reducing the number of personal days that are allowed to be cashed in at retirement.
Well, now that's one that I think if we know up front what's happening, from an accounting standpoint, I need to be setting those dollars aside. And as a matter of fact, there's actually a law that says you're supposed to do that. They do it on paper, but they don't set the money aside. The board on their books has this big liability for what's called post-retirement benefits, but they don't have the cash sitting in a bank account. It's kind of like the fallacy of Social Security. My Social Security turns right around and goes out and pays for the people who are drawing Social Security. By the way, if you are still working come January, you're going to start paying me. But we need to put the cash in there. And one of the things I will applaud this board for is they've started looking at putting dollars in their budget for the future for various things, for building new buildings. Not building new buildings, but maintaining buildings, which is something they haven't done. This last bond call where they built the Williamstown elementary school, they also are trying to fix roofs with it. We got to set money aside to fix roofs. That's just common sense. You got to take care of your facilities as you go. You can't hope that somebody's going to vote you in a big bunch of money to fix them later on, because they might not.
Reducing the student to teacher ratio.
That's one where I want to hear more from the professional educators. What is the good mix? As a board member who's not a professional educator, as a House of Delegates or Senate or the governor, we need to get that input on what the best ratio is. It's tough to teach a group of kids, particularly when that motivation level is spread out. Sometimes those kids come from a home that's not the best situation. So you got to work a little harder with that kid than maybe somebody like my daughter, who's there just itching to learn. So what is that mix that makes it the best? We set it by law, and then we just kind of forget it. We need to constantly be looking at that. I don't have the answer or what that number should be, but we have to try to optimize it all the time.
PEIA and pension protection.
The state shouldn't be in either retirement programs or insurance because they don't know anything about it. Never have, never will. If I'm a politician and I promise you these benefits, that sounds wonderful. When everybody was 25, our healthcare costs were pretty low. Now, when we're all in our 50s and 60s, guess what? We're going to the doctor a lot more. But by then, the person that voted on that when I was 25, they're dead. So they don't have to worry about it. I've actually heard national politicians say, well, I'm going to vote for that because by the time the piper comes to collect, I'll be gone. We have to fund what we're doing now for the future. It's funny that I just saw a story about the post office. The one entity that we all complain about is actually forced to do that now. They're setting aside money to take care of their retirees when they get there. Most other parts of government are not. On the one other point on that though, benefits for our employees in the state and education have always been part of a compensation package. We don't think about it, but it's an important part because medical insurance is expensive. I can tell you that because we had to change from mine to my wife's, and it was more expensive. It's a benefit we've provided in lieu of, kind of like the dental we talked about. We gotta pay for it though. We gotta not just promise it. We got to put the money in there as we go, knowing that professionals can come in and tell us statistically, the insurance companies make money on this. So it's just a mathematical calculation about how much money you need to put in to take care of these expenses as they come up. Don't just promise the benefits and then say, oh, well, we don't have to put any money in this year because we didn't get any bills. No, that's not how it works.
Well, with that, you've made it through the gauntlet. Those were the hard questions. These should be easy. We'd
Okay.
like to know what you think are your personal core values.
My core values are I love West Virginia. I've been fortunate. I've been able to live here my whole life. I had an opportunity one time to move to California. They offered me a big amount of money over what I was making, and I chose not to do it because I love home. And so many of my friends, as I mentioned, are gone from here. Now, they've made good lives other places. God love them. And as I said, I'll probably see them all when we're all retired back here because that's the way it seems to happen. But I want West Virginia to be a place where if she wants to, my daughter can stay here her whole life. And education is a vital part of that. We're not going to attract companies to this area if we don't have the best possible and efficient education. We can't just keep asking for money, money, money. We've got to work with the professionals and make it as efficient as possible. That'll attract more money to the system. Gee, wouldn't I like to be Doddridge County. Doddridge County has been sitting on a sack of money for 100 years and didn't realize till somebody came in with a drill bit and told them, hey, there's stuff down there we can get out. Doddridge County is the only county in the state that does not get any money from the state. All their property tax is so high from all the oil and gas out there that the state doesn't give them any money at all. And at the same time, they're low population. They've built brand new schools. They're building a new football stadium. Hey, who knows? But if they're smart, they're setting that money aside because eventually it's like a coal mine. They're going to run out of whatever's in there. So I wish Wood County had that problem, but we don't.
What are you really passionate about personally?
I'm passionate about the future for kids. I guess because I had a child late in life. I was 42 and my daughter was born. I've seen that, and then teaching young people in college. The future is so important, and enhancing that future, making our home here a place that folks can make a life. And I'm passionate about making that happen. I think I can help in this education. As I said, I've run for other offices because I thought I could help there. I got some skills, folks. I'm happy to help. So give me a shot.
What do you like to do in your off time?
Oh, goodness. I've done so many different things. I'm a licensed pilot, except now in my time of life, I take medication that doesn't make it safe for me to fly, to be the pilot and fly, that is. I still love flying in an airplane. I love to just get in my car and go down the country roads. I hear John Denver singing in my head when I do that. I love to just enjoy the outdoors. I was a Boy Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. I love being in the outdoors, but my wife gets on me. She says, well, sometimes you like to stay in. Yeah, sometimes I like to stay in too and watch old movies. There's so many different things that I like to do. I like to be useful. I was useful, I feel like, all my life. There's a couple of businesses that I worked for that the owner is now sitting on a really big sack of money because they sold their business at a peak time, and I helped them do that. Now, it wasn't all because of me. They started a good business, but I mentioned about being called a bean counter. Everybody that I ever worked for has more beans in their sack because they employed me. So I'm proud of that. And, I always find new things, like the court-appointed special advocate is something that I just came across, and I'm in training now, and I hope to be useful in that. So being useful is what I'm really passionate about, I guess.
So what is the most unique thing about you?
My daughter said I should tell you that I have a square head. My nickname, if you can imagine, in high school was Cube. Actually, going back to elementary school, I have a relatively big cranium, and it's kind of squared off, if you notice. Now, I tell you what really has been the great joy of my life, besides my daughter and my family, is that Nissan named one of their cars Cube. So, when you have a car named after you, you're good to go. I think I'm a hard worker. I'm a smart person, but I also am humble. I know when I'm not that smart. and I know when I need to learn more. And so I think that's one of the best things about me is that I have ideas, but I'm going to listen to everybody because somebody might have a better idea than me. It's happened over my business career, and it'll happen again.
Well, with that, we'd like to give you a few minutes to tell us and the voters anything you feel like we need to know that we haven't covered already, including how to get more information on your campaign, how to get in touch with you, donate, get involved, etc.
Well, I've centralized. I have a website. It's Smith, SMITH, for FORBOE.org, O-R-G. So SMITH, FORBOE.org. At that website, you can volunteer. It's a software as well where people can leave me messages, ask me questions. In the time of COVID, you know, I would normally be out knocking on doors. I'm so grateful for you ladies doing this because the League of Women Voters can't have their normal sit down because they normally did it in a room. So this is a wonderful opportunity. But since I can't go out and knock on doors because people probably shoot me because they're afraid what I'm bringing with me, this is great. Now the website, I've invested a little bit in that to have a place where people can connect with me. I even have a phone number that's dedicated. It's on the website as well. So that smith4boe.org is the place where a lot can happen. You can interact with me. You can find out more about things that I'm talking about. I'm also out in advertising. I don't do yard signs. I've done them in past elections. I figured everybody was quarantined in their house. So I've been doing things like I have a Facebook page. I have a newspaper advertising to try to reach out to people. I'm starting to do a little bit more. I put up a couple of billboards rather than the big wind knocks over your yard sign. So I went ahead and paid for some billboard advertising, and I'm going to be on the radio. So you'll probably hear me. But once again, I'm so grateful for you all to use this technology because my daughter's trying to help me, you know, Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff. I'm learning. Facebook came about when I was 50 years old. And as I said, most of my high school friends had moved on. And so we became nostalgic for each other. And so everybody got into Facebook. And that's how I found out where everybody lived because 90% of them, I had no idea where they'd ended up. So that's been interesting, but I still don't know how to use it well. I'm not a big guy on that. I don't know which button to push or, you know, what I'm going to do. And as you can see, I keep wanting to put this microphone like right up in my face here. And as my daughter gave me this,
line from a movie.
Yeah, she gave me this technology here. And so she's going to have to come shut it down for me because God love her.
Take care of that.
Well, Stephen, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us this afternoon. And for anyone else watching this, if you're a candidate for a local office and you're going to be on the primary ballot and you haven't heard from us, please reach out and let us know if you'd like to be interviewed. We have a Facebook page, the MOV Public Forum, and our email is movpublicforum@gmail.com. And thank everyone. I appreciate Stephen coming to talk with us. And everyone, wash those hands.